recount again what Professor Hill's demeanor was when she told you about this?
We were sitting in the university cafeteria. It was in the course of an informal conversation about her employment opportunities. She was obviously embarrassed that I had asked the question. She was reluctant to answer the question. She was emotional, hesitant.
You remember that? You remember that attitude on her part?
I remember it quite vividly because I felt embarrassed, Senator, that I had asked what may have been an inappropriate question with no intention of asking an inappropriate question.
Did you have any reason to doubt what she was saying to you?
Absolutely not.
Now, back to you, Judge Hoerchner. You've come here, you've testified under oath about a conversation some years ago, a conversation that because of its nature apparently stands out strongly in your mind. Is that correct?
There are certain aspects of the conversation that stand out in my mind. They are the fact that her boss's name was Clarence. He repeatedly asserted to her that he was her kind of man. She would not admit it, he said, and that if she had any witnesses, she would have a great case against him.
And Judge, has anybody forced you or enticed you to come forward here?
Absolutely not. In fact, Anita has never asked me to come forward.
Ms. Wells, I'll ask you the same question. Has anybody enticed you, forced you to come forward here?
No, they have not, Senator.
Is this the process you would have just soon passed up?
Oh yes, I would not be here if I could have done something else.
Mr. Carr, you're a partner in a law firm in New York City, is that correct?
That's correct.
And would it be safe to say this type of a Sunday afternoon testifying is not the sort of thing that the partners in your law firm normally do?
That's true, Senator. I would tell you that I'm a corporate lawyer. I represent clients in business transactions that we try to keep quiet and confidential and discreet. I do not believe any client I've represented would be pleased to know that their lawyer was before you or before the cameras. It is something that I have been concerned about and worried about, and was very hesitant to do this. But I think it's important to speak the truth when you know it, and I felt that I had an obligation to do this.
And Mr. Paul, you had stated earlier that when many of your colleagues signed a letter or petition or whatever opposing Judge Thomas for confirmation to the Supreme Court, that you had declined to sign that. You did not join with the others. Mr. Paul, did anybody force you to come forward here?
Absolutely not, Senator.
And why are you here?
I'm here because I read the reports in the newspaper on Monday. Credibility and character of a professional colleague of mine was called into question. I felt that it was my duty to come forward. my duty both with respect to my colleague and also, more importantly, with respect to the United States Senate.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I see the red light on, and
Thank you very much, Senator. Now we'll have one more 15-minute, an additional 15-minute round for Senator Specter.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Hoerchner, turning now to page 7 of the previous deposition which you had given on line 4, the question was, the last part of the question, you tried to talk to her about it later. Did you have any idea when your attempt was? Answer, I think it would have been once or twice when we spoke on the phone, and it was very unsuccessful, and I just know that it was after the one time that we talked about it at length.
I'm sorry, Senator. We're on page 7, line...
No, we're on page 13, line 4. And the question is, you tried to talk to her about it later. Did you have any idea when your attempt was? Answer, I think it would have been once or twice when we spoke on the phone, and it was very unsuccessful, and I just know that it was after the one time when we talked about it at length. And my question to you is, why do you think, or was there any indication given to you by Professor Hill why she wouldn't talk about it again?
The reason would have been apparent to me from her initial pain and humiliation when she told me about it the first time. I agree with Miss Wells that Anita is a very private person. She has no desire to discuss these things, particularly in a public forum.
Well, my question goes to her having talked to you about it once and her declining to talk to you about it again, and whether there was any thought in your mind as to what had actually happened on her unwillingness to talk about it when you had asked her about it on one or two occasions after that.
As I mentioned in my statement, to my surprise, at the end of the conversation, she did not seem to be cheered or comforted in any way. Apparently, talking about it was of absolutely no help to her.
Let me turn now, Judge Hoerchner, to the question about a couple of the job changes. And you had commented in your deposition, which appears at page 7, line 4, picking up at the end of line 4. She was going to leave because of that, whether or not she had another job, and that was in response to the question of her reasons for leaving her job at EEOC. Were you aware of the fact that she did not leave her job at EEOC, or that the circumstances as represented to you
I believe after she left, she told me, I met her at a professional conference, and it was clear that she did have another job. In that conversation, she did not say that she was going to leave her job and refuse to get another job. She just said that she would give herself some time and then she would leave no matter what.
Well, my question to you goes to the point as to whether, when you said that she was going to leave EEOC, whether she had another job or not, whether from the conversation which you had with her, you thought that she was so upset that she would leave EEOC even if she couldn't find another job. It goes to the issue as to how upset she was on the conversation that she had with you when she did not leave immediately, but did not leave until she found another job.
At The time that we spoke, she was very upset.
Let me move on then, Judge Hoerchner. You talked on page 30 of your deposition about your view of Judge Thomas, and it starts page 30, line 5. Well, I'll skip up to line 2 where it said, question, and you said an attitude toward power. Where did that come from? Why would you think that Judge Thomas had an attitude about power? Where did that come from? Answer, it came from the idea that most of the positions that he had that I knew about were in civil rights, equal employment opportunity, and that his behavior really showed a disregard for general principles of equal opportunity or the rights of individuals, and it led me to believe that he possibly thought that the law was for other people. My question, Judge Hoerchner, did you ever consider, in the light of Professor Hill's telling you that Judge Thomas had sexually harassed her, and he was the chairman of the EEOC, which was the nation's chief law enforcement officer on this issue, did you ever consider giving Professor Hill advice that she ought to come forward and expose him so that he would not be in a position to thwart appropriate enforcement of equal rights and laws against sexual harassment?
No, Senator, I did not. I believe that the tremendous inequity in power between them would have been dispositive.
On page 37, Judge Hoerchner, you refer to a conversation with Mr. James Bldg. Would you tell us what the circumstances were of that, please?
A conversation between Anita and Jim Bldg.
Between you and Jim Bldg.
Between myself and Jim Bldg. Yes. After I was interviewed by the FBI, I left the interview, I believe, with the understanding that a pseudonym, a number, LA1, would be used instead of my name. The next day, I was in a training class with other judges, and the presiding judge of the board where we were being trained pulled me out of class because I had a telephone call from the FBI. It was the FBI agent who had interviewed me. He said that the people in Washington wanted me to give my name. He led me to understand that because there were only 3 names involved, everyone would know who LA1 was. At that point, I was still unsure whether I wanted to give my name. The state court system that I work in is part of the executive branch under a Republican administration. I feared retaliation. I knew that there was one person on the Hill. I knew of the name of one person who was at Yale at the same time that I was, who was a member of my brother's class. And I wished to speak with him about the ramifications of having my name used in the FBI report.
Did Mr. Bldg urge you to come forward?
Absolutely not. He refused to give me any advice. He repeated many times, very kindly, that he understood my reluctance.
Judge Hoerchner, have you heard Professor Hill's testimony about the details as to what she said, Judge Thomas said to her? without repeating them now?
I believe I heard almost all of it.
Did she give you any details at all except for saying that he pushed himself on her and tried to date her, and the statement about if they had a witness it would be a good case? But did she tell you about any of the other materials, about the films and about the rest of it?
About the, I'm sorry.
About the films and about the
films.
rest of what she had testified here, which you say you think you heard.
I do not have a specific memory of that, and that would be very much in keeping with her reserved character.
Let me ask you about one final part of the transcript, and it appears at page 12, line 14. And the question is it possible, Judge Hoerchner, that she was referring to, and again, I understand the comments you made about your recollection, is it possible that she was referring to the same time period in which she worked at EEOC? Answer, well, I was trying to remember all of this at first. At one point I thought it was EEOC, but I was drawing conclusions based on other parts of my memory. I really don't know which it was, and again, I really don't know if it was 1981 versus another time. And I was concerned when I saw this reference that you said that you, quote, I was drawing conclusions based on other parts of my memory, close quote. And my question to you is what did you mean by that?
Well, I did know that Clarence Thomas became the chair for the EEOC. Now, whether I knew that at the time I spoke to Anita when we had the most memorable conversation or not, I can't really say.
Well, what was there that you were drawing from other parts of your memory, though?
I think I mentioned to the staff members that I have a vague memory of something about education films that they had reviewed for civil rights, sexual harassment related issues, and that is a very vague memory.
Judge Hoerchner, did Professor Hill ever have any discussion with you about her move from the private law firm to the Department of Education? She has testified that one of the reasons she left the Department of Education to go with Judge Thomas to EEOC, notwithstanding the incidents, was that she was fearful that the Department of Education would be abolished because that was one of the planks in President Reagan's program. Did you ever have any conversation with her or any insight into any of her thinking when she left the law firm to go to the Department of Education? Any concern that that might be insecure because the department might be abolished?
I don't remember anything about the abolition of the department. The only thing I remember her saying about her desire to go to the Department of Education was that she was very interested in working in a policy-making position.
Mr. Carr, you have testified that Professor Hill told you about comments during the course of a telephone conversation. How did they happen to arise during the course of a telephone conversation?
My recollection is that we spoke periodically, and it was natural in those conversations to inquire about how we were each doing. In this conversation, it was clear that she was not doing very well, and I asked her why she was upset or what was bothering her, and this is what she explained.
When you say it was clear from your conversation that she was not doing very well, could you amplify that?
Well,
I ask it because it's rather unusual, obviously.
Experience that you have had relative to judging, have you found that when confronted with a issue of fact that the recollection process, where the fact occurred several years previous, that recollection of the incident and the details of the instance do not always come to mind in the witness's recital of them, and is recollection a continuing process, particularly if events, incidences, facts, conversations occurred a number of years ago?
Yes, I definitely believe that is the case.
Do conversations with people who bring back to your memory certain instances help in regards to trying to comprehensively refresh your memory?
I believe that is the case as well. I do wish to say, though, that I have never discussed with Anita since that main conversation that I remember the substance of that conversation or when it took place.
Now, we are faced with the issue here between two people, both Yale Law School graduates, both who appear to have had, prior to all of this rising, good reputations among people that had worked with them. And we have the problem of trying to sift through all of the facts and come up with some decision, if it's humanly possible, and it may not be humanly possible, of who's telling the truth. The issue of motivation as to someone coming forward and making a statement that was untrue arises. Now, we've gone into various elements that people might think of in regards to motivation, and I want to just ask you, all of you, and each of you can answer it. Was she, in your observation of her, a zealous cause person, whether it be in civil rights, feminist movement, or whatever? Did she ever indicate to you that she was a zealous cause person who was willing to do great things, move forward, take drastic steps in order to advance whatever her cause would be?
Most definitely not, Senator. I know that she worked under the Reagan administration. To this date, I have no idea how she votes. I have very little sense of where she would fit on a political spectrum. And further, due to the quiet and gentle strength of her nature, she is not someone who seeks a public forum.
Certainly you wouldn't use the word militant in any degree.
I think she would be very offended by that term.
All right, Ms. Wells and Glory, give us your...
I would agree with the judge. In all the time that I've known Professor Hill, we've not had a conversation that would indicate a militant viewpoint about current affairs or any particular philosophy. She's very even-tempered in my estimation.
Your characterization of her as militant, I found...
I don't need necessarily use militant. It's probably the extreme word.
Just in response to that, I'm a corporate, sort of a Wall Street lawyer by profession, and I would consider myself militant compared to Anita Hill.
What did you said I consider? Mr. Paul?
I recall one occasion asking her specifically about whether she agreed with the policies Reagan administration generally on civil rights issues, and I remember her saying that she didn't have any disagreements with them. The only time I remember her being at all animated in a political discussion was the lunch table discussion that I referred to in my testimony, where she very strenuously defended her former mentor, teacher, Judge Robert Bork.
I'm limited as to 5 minutes, and I just sort of go over these and ask each of you to make comments on it. Vindictiveness, a martyr-type complex, desire to be a hero, write a book, spurned woman or scorned woman in regards to romantic, and then the issue of whether or not she has any fantasy or out of touch with reality. I suppose most of you have heard what we have been tempted to go over to find motivation, and if you would comment on those, each one of you.
Is that, to start with me,
Yes,
Senator? On vindictiveness, I have never known Anita to express a desire for revenge in any context. I'll address the characteristics that I remember, and then I hope you can refresh my memory. She was not a spurned woman, and I am unaware of any context in which she has ever felt herself to be a spurned woman. And what are the other qualities?
Well, I don't know whether I remember them all. I'd have to go back and read the martyr complex hero. You could look at it from a group basis and give us, because my time is up, just sort of overall relative to these matters, give us a thumbnail viewpoint.
They're all, they sound like the product of fantasy, frankly, Senator. She, as we've all commented, is a very private, reserved person whose personal style is that of gentleness, dignity, and understatement. She's very uncomfortable with the prospect of being in the public eye.
All right, Ms. Wells.
The answer would be in the negative for all of the qualities, if you will, that you listed, Senator. I would say that the thing that attracted me to Professor Hill, made me feel I want to know this person, is the fact that she is a very sweet-natured person. And yet you can feel from within her a wonderment, a sense of joy about life. And I love to hear her laugh, and she loves to laugh. She is a happy person, a very giving person, and one of the best friends anyone could hope to have.
You have to remember that my recollections of Anita Hill are, I guess, 9 years ago. I can't remember any of those characteristics being particularly applicable to her. I heard earlier that this characterization as a spurned woman, and for a moment I tried to recall whether I had spurned her or she had maybe spurned me, but I don't recall.
Senator, I don't know Professor Hill in the same personal way as these other individuals. I know her as a professional colleague, and she has always struck me as a person with 2 feet very firmly planted on the ground. The only book, Senator, I can conceive of her wanting to write would be a book on the Uniform Commercial Code.
Now, again, we're going to continue this going back and forth for 5 minutes. I have indicated to senators on both sides that as we get to the end of the process and people have no questions, but if one senator continues to have questions, they'll have an opportunity to ask those questions. So, but we will alternate, so every senator gets an opportunity to participate this way. And I'll just recognize the ranking member each time, and he can determine who will move next. I recognize the Senator from South Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield my 5 minutes to Senator Specter and suggest to the other members that they yield that time to him such as they don't need. I now yield to Senator Hatch.
I'd be happy to yield my 5 minutes to Senator Specter as well. I think he has some more questions.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because the anguish of the committee is just encompassed in the immediate remarks of Ellen Wells, saying those things about Ms. Hill in your beautiful way is just exactly what Jack Danforth said about Clarence Thomas, that he was a man of joy, you said, and laughter, and a great friend to be around, and that was said the first day, and now you add to it this day, and that is the anguish of the moment for us. And we are, trying our best. We really are not open-minded, but trying, because we've had a vote here already. The vote was 7-7. And when you hear people speak, the two speaking that side of the aisle, they are speaking on the basis that they voted against Judge Clarence Thomas to confirmation to the U.S. Supreme Court. And when you hear Senator Specter and Senator Hatch, they voted for his confirmation. So this is really not, we're not here as judges, as our chairman has so clearly reminded you, and it becomes ever more clear every day. But we're doing our best. And they can chuckle and giggle and laugh about the process and be cynical. Cynics have no heroes, and they never will. Something terribly wrong, something terribly bad has happened here. I don't know that we'll ever find it. But I just wanted to ask, just to be sure that I have Mr. Paul, just one question. In your statement, you said when she told you of this, you did not recall whether she went on to say the name Clarence Thomas. You've been very frank about that. You don't remember that.
I don't recall that she did, Senator. She may have, but it would have meant nothing to me.
And then you said if she said it, the name would not have meant anything to me since I would not have recognized it at the time.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, and then, part of this terrible process has been about sexual harassment, a great deal of it, but some of it has been about leaks, a lot of it too. And so I looked in your testimony here, the transcript of proceedings, and on page 18, you name a person who spoke with you, who told you that you were going to be subpoenaed later that day. That person is on Senator Biden's staff, and a very reputable man. His name I do not bring up. He's a senior staff person. That would have been his job, for him to call you and say you are going to be subpoenaed. But I was interested in your comment only because I had my old ball dome battered in the other day by this person. It says here on page 18 that Mr. Biden's person spoke with you to say that I was going to be subpoenaed later today, although I had already learned that from Nina Totenberg.
Senator, I should explain.
Would you tell me how that came to pass? I just have a passing interest.
I didn't mean to take. Yes, Senator, I apologize. I didn't mean to take sides between you and Ms. Totenberg.
No, we're both able to do that.
Yes, I was being perhaps too glib there. I've never spoken to Ms. Totenberg. What I meant was that I'd been woken up by my clock radio going off, and I heard Ms. Totenberg say my name as I woke up, saying that I had been subpoenaed to appear before this committee.
I see.
It was quite a wake-up call, Senator.
See, that saved us a further round. And wait till I tell you what she told me. No. I have it here before me, but it is Sunday in America. So I shall leave it out. But one final question, and here it really is. You're speaking with passion and with truth. And this is my question. Does it seem odd to any of you here that these universally crude and obscene things, which we've all heard, it's all that's out there, and we know that they took place, according to Ms. Hill, between 81, 82, 83, 84, somewhere in all that pattern, perhaps. That's what we're told. And that she has stated to this panel, pressure, that this man was exerting power over her, authority, status, the threat of a loss of a job. Those things are all in this record, and yet others have said that because she was a Schedule A attorney, there was never any fear of that, and that she knew that, or should have known that. And others have given us information that there was plenty of budget there, and she would have been taken care of. That'll come in later in the next panel. So here it is, this foul stack of stench, justifiably offensive in any category, that she was offended, justifiably, embarrassed, justifiably, and that she was repelled, justifiably. And I ask you, why then, after she left his power, after she left his presence, after she left his influence and his domination, or whatever it was that gave her fear, and call it fear, or revulsion, or repulsion, why did she twice after that visit personally with him in Tulsa, Oklahoma, had dinner with him in the presence of others, had breakfast with him in the presence of others, rode to the airport alone with him in the presence of no one, and we have 11 phone calls initiated by her from 1984 through the date of Clarence Thomas's marriage to Jenny Lamp. And then it all ended, and not a single contact came forward. What does that say about behavior? Because Ms. Hill is not alleging sexual harassment. Go back and look. Go back and look at her press conference. Go back and look at all of it. She is alleging behavior. We're here today because of behavior. If we are here today because of behavior, may I please have a summary from you? What does this say about her behavior? I would ask each of you, and I'll defer my next round, I just think it's critical. We're talking about behavior. As human beings, I'd like you to respond to this as behavior.
Senator, I'm not an expert in the field of sexual harassment, and I think I probably should defer to someone who has had better, more experience in that area.
Thank you. Mr. Carr.
Neither am I an expert in sexual harassment or, for that matter, behavioral sciences. However, I do know that in looking forward as a young professional at my career, I am concerned that I will be on good terms with people who have a say or impact or in a position to judge my career. And I would be extremely hesitant to say or do anything to offend or cut them off for fear that in the future they might adversely impact my career. I may need them for a reference, anything of that sort. And it may well be that Anita Hill, and I'm just telling you this is my own view on the way people act. It may well be that a good portion of Anita Hill's, so to speak, professional claim to fame was due to her experiences with Clarence Thomas. And it may well be that to categorically cut off that relationship would have been detrimental to her career going forward.
Even in the face of this stuff. Now, may I ask Ms. Wells?
Yes, Senator. I think Mr. Carr has stated the case very well, and even in the face of that, you would, until she got to be in a position that would be, shall we say, higher, she would not wish to find herself on less than cordial terms with him. It is something that I know my mother told me, and I'm sure Anita's mother told her. When you leave, make sure you leave friends behind, because you don't know who you may need later on. And so you at least want to be cordial. I know I get Christmas cards from people that I don't see from one end of the year to the other, and quite frankly, do not wish to. And I also return their cards and will return their calls. And these are people who have insulted me and done things which have perhaps degraded me at times. But there are things that you have to put up with. And being a black woman, you know you have to put up with a lot. And so you grit your teeth and you do it.
Judge.
Senator, I believe Anita has testified very credibly in response to the issues that you raised. I would like to add my voice to what Mr. Carr has said, that simply the realities of business and professional life are such that she could not afford to burn that particular bridge behind her, particularly to extend the metaphor, when that bridge is the highest person in her field and her claim to fame. And to that, I would add the understanding of her character, that she, in my impression, only wanted the behavior to stop. She has no desire to get even or to harm him.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I'm afraid that will remain a puzzlement for me forever as to how that can be where one would continue a relationship with a person that had done this foul presentation of verbal garbage to him or her, and I shall never understand that. It remains one of my great quandaries. And another thing that puzzles me deeply, she was in Washington, D.C., where there would have been a very fertile ground for her complaint. It might not have been out in the land. It might not have been in some other state of the Union, but she was in Washington, D.C. at a time of public consciousness and awareness. And it just seems to me impossible to believe that something that happened 10 years or 8 years ago can come out of the night like a missile and destroy a man after 43 years of exemplary life.
Senator Grassley.
Senator, if we go to this side.
Oh, excuse me.
If we could. Senator Metzenbaum next.
Address these comments to the two ladies in the panel. These hearings have brought forth comments from women that I'm not sure we men totally appreciate the significance of sexual harassment. During these hearings, one lady has come to me and told me that when she was 16 years old, she was fondled by a male, friend of the family, and she never told her parents, never told anybody about it for 27 years, till the night before she spoke to me, and she had told her husband. And that all during that entire 27 years, she had felt that she was somehow guilty, that she had done something wrong, but she hadn't done anything. Nothing. She was in the presence of this other person, and it occurred. Another lady told me that she had worked at a company where the chief executive had made numerous approaches to her. And she said, I didn't quit talking to him. I didn't quit having a relationship if he gave me a ride home. I didn't create a chasm between us, because I, as a black woman, was concerned about my future. And I just want to ask you, Judge and Ms. Wells, if you can maybe explain to us 14 men and the balance of our colleagues in the Senate and maybe the rest of the country, what it is to experience sexual harassment, or how a woman feels, and the repression that she places upon herself not to talk about it or do anything about it, or to sever the relationship with the person who has harassed her. Either one of you first.
I think one of the first things you would ask yourself is, what did I do? You blame yourself. You say, is it something I'm wearing? I've been in this sort of situation. Okay, perhaps it's the perfume I have on. I went to Catholic school, and the nuns certainly taught me to be careful in my dress. I remember one sister telling us that if you had to be careful with the perfume that you wore, because the title indicated the kind of emotions you would generate in a gentleman. All right? And I laugh, but I tell you, Sister Gagne has, and the advice she's given me has held me in good stead. So I paid attention to that. But you do ask yourself, what did I do? And so you try to change your behavior, because it must be me. I must be the wrong party here. And then I think you perhaps start to get angry and frustrated, but there's always that sense of being powerless, and you're also ashamed. I mean, what can you tell your friends and family? Because they ask you, well, what did you do? And so you keep it in. You don't say anything. Or if someone says, well, then you should go forward, you have to think again, well, how am I going to pay the phone bill if I do that? And yes, perhaps this job is secure, but maybe they'll post me in an office in a corner with a telephone and the Washington Post to read from 9 to 5. And that won't get me anywhere. So you're quiet and you're ashamed, and you sit there and you take it.
Senator, I agree that there is a tremendous tendency towards self-blame in women who are subjected to this sort of experience. It goes so far back into our history, even in the Garden of Eden. Who was the bad person there? Who offered the apple to Adam and had to suffer for that for the rest of eternity? Or for the rest of human history. But I believe that most women who are in a situation of sexual harassment really only desire cessation of the problem. They have very often, I believe, little desire for revenge. If the behavior stops, then they are much more comfortable, I believe, but I think the pain remains. I think it's indelible.
Let me reiterate here. There are two distinct issues here. One is the response of those victimized and whether or not someone was victimized here. It's relevant testimony, what we just heard. I always find it difficult as to why men can't understand it. I would just ask, I wonder how many tens of thousands of millions of men in this country work for a boss who treats them like a lackey, tells them to do certain things and stay on the job. And we never ask, why does that man stay on the job? I wonder how many men there are, if in fact they were approached by a man on the job who was had a different sexual preference than they do. I wonder how ready they would be to go open and say, by the way, my boss, that fellow up there, approached me. A lot would, just like a lot of women do, go forward. A lot wouldn't. I mean, I don't know why we have so much trouble understanding the pattern of a victimized person. But that's not the issue here today. The issue here today is whether or not there was victimization, whether or not there was harassment. Although this is relevant, I want to keep bringing it back. The only reason it's brought up now is because those who are making, as they should, Judge Thomas's case, keep coming forward and saying, why would you stay? I have not brought forward, as was suggested, quote, expert testimony on the pattern of victimization, the pattern of behavior that people would engage in. I've held numerous hours of hearings on that subject, but we are here again, please, as a fellow I used to work for, a great trial lawyer in Delaware would say, let's keep our eye on the ball. And the ball is not the overall pattern of harassment in America, but whether or not Anita Hill was harassed. And this will only continue to be brought up in response as long as we continue to ask the question, why would she stay? Both legitimate questions. Both legitimate questions. But let's keep our eye on the ball as best we can. Now, I yield to my friend from South Carolina.
Senator
None of you have claimed close friendship with Anita Hills. What bothers me in this whole hearing is the fact that these allegations, as serious as they are and as serious as she felt about them to come forward at this time, seems to me would also be told to close friends who would come and want to testify. And I don't have any indication that we have any close friends who are willing to come and testify. Do you know that she is a person who has close friends, or does this bother you that you have not had this close friendship with her, and yet you come forward and other people don't come forward?
Senator Grassley, I believe that you're laboring under a misapprehension. I consider Anita Hill a very close friend and one of my very best friends from law school.
You do consider her a close
Yes.
friend? Okay, what about for the other three?
I consider myself a close friend. In my comments at the start of this session, I mentioned that I had not seen or spoken to her in 2 years, but that was scheduling problem, shall we say. We kept in contact occasionally through correspondence, and one of the reasons I will, and that's just the last 2 years, one of the reasons I know that we are close is because the moment the phone rings and I hear her voice or she hears my voice, we pick up as though the conversation had just ended an hour before. So I have this this tie to her, of this invisible tie to her that exists across the miles that separate us.
But not close enough in either one of your two cases. Now that you say you were close friends to her, I recall that you did not offer her any advice. Why would you, if she is a close friend, why would you not offer advice in a time of trial and tribulation like she evidently was going through?
In my case, it was because the situation was so personal and painful. It would have been very presumptuous of me to try to tell her what to do. I would like to add that there are other very close friends of her under subpoena to testify before this committee.
When your friendship, the more trying the situation is, wouldn't it demand your sort of help the closer that relationship is?
My feeling seems to have been pretty much what Mr. Carr said that his was, that I wanted to listen and to comfort. And it is very painful to me that my listening apparently did not provide comfort.
I would just say that you may find this difficult to understand, but the limitations on our relationship have to do with time. It began and it ended. But during the period of time, I would have considered us close. I would have considered us very close.
Senator, concerning on that point of why I would not have offered her advice, as I indicated, she wanted a sympathetic ear, and the nature of the complaint is such that you have to be very careful what you suggest to someone in terms of how they ought to proceed because of the very serious ramifications. And quite frankly, although I may very well have said something that sounded like advice, but I'm afraid I would have told her to do exactly what she did. I would have been wrong, but that is what I would have done.
Senator, as I've testified, I am not a close personal friend of Professor Hill's. I am a professional colleague of hers who has always been very impressed by her, and so my recollections are not colored by any personal relationship to her.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the rest of my time to Senator Specter.
Well, since there's only a few seconds left on the time, we'll give Senator Specter more time. I mean, not more, we'll give, anyway. Senator Kennedy, no, I'm sorry. We're going back to this side again.
What? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I did. I misled you. I'm sorry. We will not go to Senator Specter now. We will go to Senator Kennedy, and then we will go to Senator Brown, and then we will go to Senator DeConcini, and then we'll go back to Senator Specter. And if he needs more than 5 minutes, we'll do more than 5 minutes. But so it's Senator Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure I want to join in welcoming the panel. And I'm sure in their own mind they must be wondering why they're being so questioned about what they understand were conversations that took place over a period of years. And I commend them for the honesty of their comments and for the helpfulness that they have provided this committee. I think it's been a very important service. Some people just don't want to believe you. They have to understand that. They just don't want to believe you, and they don't want to believe Professor Hill. That's a fact of the matter is. And you may be detecting some of that in the course of the hearing and the questions this afternoon. But I hope, Mr. Chairman, that after this panel, we're not going to hear any more comments, unworthy, unsubstantiated comments, unjustified comments about Professor Hill and perjury, as we heard in this room yesterday. I hope we're not going to hear any more comments about Professor Hill being a tool of the various advocacy groups after we've heard from Ellen Wells and John Carr and Joe Paul, all who have volunteered to come forward after they heard about this in the newspapers. Comments about individual groups and staffers trying to persuade her. I hope we're not going to hear more about politics. You can imagine what Professor Hill would have gone through if she'd been a Democrat, and we heard this afternoon she was a Bork supporter, worked in a Republican administration. I hope we're not going to hear a lot more about comments about politics. I hope we're not going to hear a lot more comments about fantasy stories picked out of books and law cases after we've heard from this distinguished panel, or how there have been attempts in the 11th hour to derail this nomination. I hope we can clear this room of the dirt and innuendo that's been suggested by Professor Hill as well, about over the transom information, about faxes, about proclivities. We heard a good deal about character assassination yesterday, and I hope we're going to be sensitive to the attempts of character assassination on Professor Hill. They're unworthy. They're unworthy. And quite frankly, I hope we're not going to hear a lot more about racism as we consider this nominee. Fact is that these points of sexual harassment are made by an Afro-American against an Afro-American. The issue isn't discrimination and racism, it's about sexual harassment. And I hope we can keep our eye on that particular issue. I want to thank the panel for their testimony, for their response to questions. I found it enormously enlightening. I think the members of the Senate will. It's very clear from your presence here, your comments you've made, the way you've responded to questions, that you're doing this as a matter of responsibility and justice. Justice to an individual who's had the courage in very difficult and trying times, and everyone who has seen what attempts to go after her over the period of the last 3 days have to understand her hesitancy. But your presence here, I think, has been enormously helpful to this committee and to the Senate. And I thank you for responding.
Senator Brown.
Thank you. I think your coming today is not only appreciated but very helpful for us to understand the state of mind of Anita Hill, and I think very helpful in giving some verification to her thoughts at the times that you all had conversations with her. As I review the various comments that each of you have made, it strikes me that you've given verification to the fact that she indeed talked about being asked out, talked about inappropriate actions. I believe one of you used, or several of you used the term sexual harassment. I want to try and get a feel if there were other things besides these involved in what she related to you. Specifically, did she relate to any of you that there was any touching, any physical contact initiated by Clarence Thomas? Anyone have that conversation?
No, Senator, she did not relay that to me.
Nor to me, Senator.
She never told me that. I don't believe. I don't recall.
I don't recall.
We've heard some comments about very gross language being used, with extremely descriptive terms being used. Were those terms related to any of you?
Beg your pardon? I don't think I understood.
We've heard comments that Judge Thomas used very gross language with very explicit terms. Were those specific terms related to any of you in the conversation you had with her?
I don't recall.
My recollection is that I attempted to find out more about what had happened briefly, but that she did not want to talk about it.
She did not relay those terms to me. As I said, it would have been a use of sexually explicit language, and neither she nor I engage in such conversation.
I do not recall her use of such terms with me either.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your very straightforward responses. I'll give the balance of my time to Senator Specter as well.
Specter. Oh, wait a minute. No, go back. Oh, I beg your pardon.
He does have remaining time if it's go to Senator DeConcini. Okay.
I didn't pick that up when Specter questions. Just go ahead.
Senator DeConcini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sure that Senator Specter is going to have all the time. I want to thank you too for coming forward. And we all have, some judgments that we all took here on Judge Thomas before we had to come back. So we all have staked out a position. The other 84 senators, some have and some haven't. So all of us here, as you may know, have already taken a position. But our job is to listen, and I've listened, and I thank you for coming forward. And my questions, I hope, are really observations, first of all. Mr. Carr just really got me when you said that, or did you say this, that your appearance here, not only you'd much rather be doing something else, but it was not going to enhance your career and that your corporate clients wouldn't like this? Is that what you said, or did I misinterpret you?
I don't know the political views of my corporate clients per se, Senator. What I meant was that I doubted that any of them would find it a positive thing.
They wouldn't.
I don't think so.
You don't think
know,
so?
Although I don't know whether they would find it a negative thing.
Just out of curiosity, and it has nothing to do with here, and if you don't have to do this, I'd like to know, just if you'd call me sometime, if your corporate clients really would object to you coming forward and doing this, and you don't even have to tell me who they are. But it just struck me that I think any corporate client would be proud of you, that you're that kind of a man. But maybe I'm wrong. I haven't practiced law for 15 years, and so maybe corporation and corporate clients are different than they were when I practiced. The other thing is, Mr. Carr, did you say that no outside group or anybody contacted you, that you came forward on your own?
I saw the accusations on the television. Mm-hmm. I remember them. I wrote a letter to Anita Hill telling her that I remembered our conversation, and then I was contacted by people working with her and asked if I would testify about that.
Would. And your lawyer is Janet Napolitano? Or is
no,
that...
she's I assume Anita's lawyer.
She's Anita's lawyer. I didn't know if she also represented you. She's a very fine lawyer. I happen to know her. Ms. Wells, let me ask you this. I appreciate your explanation of why a woman, and perhaps this applies to men too in different senses, why a woman would stay on under sexual harassment. And you said you would have done that, and you would have advised her, even though now you say that was wrong, and I appreciate that honesty. If Professor Hill had told you the explicits that she told this committee, number one, would you have felt obligated to give her advice? And would that advice have been, as you said, it would have been to stay on?
Oh. If I had learned of the actual nature of the behavior, I was stunned, first of all, just to hear the news without details. To hear the details, I think I would have been so outraged that I perhaps would have said, well, we have to do something. You cannot live through this.
And personally, nobody can really get inside someone else's moccasins or shoes, but if that had happened to you, would you have stayed on and moved on in the job? The explicitness of the testimony given yesterday?
Without getting into details, Senator, and I say this only to try to help you to understand what I think went on here. I would be unsure simply because I was touched in the workplace, not merely on one occasion, and I stayed in that position. So therefore, I really can't say what I would have done with words.
And Judge, did Professor Hill at any time in your conversations mention to you her desire to be advanced in the EEOC of another position she would like to have had or was seeking?
No, not to my recollection.
There was never any discussion in that hour-long conversation of her aspirations or her disappointment or her
No,
ambitions.
but let me clarify, if I may. I don't know how long that conversation lasted. I do know that we often spoke for up to an hour.
And none of those conversations, whether they were 10 minutes or up to an hour, there was ever any discussion about her ambitions or her desires to move on and what she thought her chances were, or any discussions along that line?
No, absolutely not. The only thing I clearly remember her saying about the nature of the work was that she liked being...
You said I could have a little more time. Let me just ask, excuse me, I didn't hear your answer.
She made no comments about
Thank you.
moving upward or...
I did hear your answer. Ms. Hill, Judge Hoerchner, did you have to hire a lawyer to come here today?
No.
You didn't. Do you have a lawyer representing you here?
I have a lawyer who was my moot court director at Yale Law School. His name is Ron Allen.
And he's a pro bono lawyer, or are you paying him?
He has not submitted a bill yet.
Okay. Lots of luck, Mr. Allen. Thank you. And just lastly, Dean Paul, you don't consider yourself a friend of Professor Hill, a professional acquaintance, is that fair to say?
I would say that we were professional colleagues. We're on friendly terms. I see Professor Hill typically once or twice a year at the annual meetings of the Association of American Law Schools.
Yeah. Do you think you fall into the category then in her statement where she said, "It is only after a great deal of agonizing consideration that I'm able to talk of these unpleasant matters to anyone but my closest friends"? She must consider you a friend, don't you think?
I think that she considers me a friendly professional colleague. I don't know why she chose to relate the story to me. I don't know if she remembers relating the story to me. As I say, I haven't spoken to Professor Hill since prior to the Thomas nomination.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman, for the additional time. I appreciate it.
Senator Specter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Wells, let me pick up with your statement as I wrote it down when you heard the details as to what Professor Hill had said, that Judge Thomas said to her that, quote, "so outraged you'd have to do something." The issue which we have before us is one of credibility as to whom to believe. And we have gained substantial insights and a lot of testimony which has been given as to the view of a woman in a position of this sort. And you did not know the details. You only knew that it was inappropriate and sexual in nature as to what Professor Hill had told you. That's what your testimony has been here today. But when you get the details, as you've heard them, and you say you would have been so outraged that something would have to have been done, we have a situation where Professor Hill went from the Department of Education to the EEOC, and she was a classification attorney where she could have kept her job. And then she went with him voluntarily on a trip to Oral Roberts. Not suggesting any impropriety, but she went with him. And after that, she called him on many occasions. There are 11 in a log, and we'll have a witness later who will testify that she called him on many other occasions that weren't written down in the log because they got through to Judge Thomas. And we have an astute professor, a law professor, a lawyer who was concerned about being fired by Judge Thomas, so that when he gave her work assignments, she wrote them all down. The date she received them, the nature of the work, how long it took her to finish them. But in the context of that kind of concern, and she testifies about these outlandish statements having been made, she doesn't write any of them down. And we're trying to figure out what really happened. If it's sexual harassment, man oughtn't to be on the court. He oughtn't to be on any court. He oughtn't to be the head of EEOC. And the testimony has been that, I think it was, he was her claim to fame. Should not burn that bridge. But even considering all of that, and knowing Professor Hill as you do, and in the light of your statement, so outraged have to do something, what would that something have been? Would it have been to follow him from one job to another, to call him up, to drive him to the airport? Or would it at least have been not to maintain that kind of an association?
Well, Senator, as I believe I indicated earlier, one of the reasons that I would be hesitant to offer advice on this kind of issue is because of the ramifications, and it's such a personal thing. So yes, if she had said something like that, sitting outside of the situation, I would have said, oh, this is terrible, yes, you must do something. But what could I actually expect her to do? When I told a close friend about my occurrence of terms of being touched, I was told immediately, oh, you should file a suit. I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't do that. First of all, who saw it? Nobody. But I tell you this, I didn't need to write it down because I remember the places on my body that he touched. Just as she did not need to write down the words he used because they're burned indelibly into her brain. And so, yes, it may seem strange that you maintain contact, but I think it's something that you just school yourself to do. I understand that that seems difficult, but that is what happens oftentimes, and it takes a great deal of strength and courage to not maintain some kind of a cordial relationship, if you will, because we're all told about networking. I mean, my goodness gracious, you can open up any women's magazine and you can go to seminars on how women are supposed to learn to network since we don't have the old boys club. Take up golf, ladies. Take up tennis. Learn to get out there so you can do these things to maintain these contacts, and so you don't burn your bridges.
So in essence, you're saying that even though you said so outraged have to do something, that ultimately you would have done nothing?
I think that is the case.
And would have maintained that kind of a friendly relationship, called him up, drive him to the airport, etc.?
I don't know all the circumstances, but given the kind of work, I'm sorry?
Well, Professor Hill has said that she made those calls. She admits to 11 calls.
Yes.
And I think the record is plain that she did drive him to the airport. Mm-hmm. And it's, of course, very plain that she moved with him from one agency to another, and that she went to Oral Roberts. She accompanied him on a trip. And we're interested in your perspective, and interested if you would have maintained all of those kinds of activities, given the feelings that were involved with the reprehensible statements alleged to have been made.
Well, over the course of, let's see, I'm not sure, I think it was 1983 when she started at Oral Roberts, and we're at 1991. I don't see 11 calls, some of them on behalf of other people, as a lot of contact. It's business in nature.
Well, there were more calls than that, 11, which were recorded where he was not present. Mr. Carr, you said that you found the comments outrageous. Did you give any thought at the time you had this telephone conversation with Professor Hill to saying to her, What are you going to do about it? Let's consider taking some action. Here you have a man who's the head of the EEOC, chief law enforcement of the country on sexual harassment cases. Did the thought cross your mind that whether or not she did anything, that these outrageous comments should at least warrant some consideration of some action?
I don't recall that we discussed that, or that we did not discuss it. It may well be that at that point she had decided to leave his employee, and she told me that. I just don't recall.
Well, my question to you is, did you give her any such advice? Are you saying that you might have given her that advice or might consider it, but simply now do not recall?
I'm saying I don't recall today, that's right.
Professor Paul, you testified about the comment made by an associate of yours, the fox in the hen house, and I believe as you characterized it, you were shocked and astonished by what Professor Hill had told you. Did you give any thought to any suggestion about her taking some action, given the fact that this happened at the EEOC, the agency which was charged with enforcing laws against sexual harassment?
As I testified, Senator, I asked her if she'd taken any recourse, and she said no. And I asked her why not. She said that she felt that she had no recourse. I don't recall more than that conversation.
Your testimony was that she said she had been sexually harassed by a supervisor. I'm advised, we have to have testimony on this, but I'm advised reliably that she had two supervisors besides Judge Thomas, who was her ultimate supervisor as the chairman of the EEOC. Would the statement she made to you about a supervisor comprehend as well a supervisor other than the chairman of the EEOC?
Well, Senator, she said that she'd been sexually harassed by her supervisor. From what I know of Professor Hill, it's not conceivable to me that she would now be blaming Judge Thomas for the actions of another man. So I would have to conclude that, no, Senator, I believe that she was talking about Judge Thomas.
Well, I'm not asking you for a conclusion. I'm asking you about what she said in terms of a supervisor, and whether that, aside from any other inferences which you may make, whether the category supervisor, or whatever it was she said, would comprehend other supervisors, if in fact there were, and we have to hear about that.
I don't know, Senator.
Judge Hoerchner, let me come back to a couple of points which have been asked, that I asked you about by some other people. And I turn to page 5 of the notes of testimony and line 6. Where, page 5, line 6.
Thank you. Senator, I'm not going to cut you off, but again, there's some that haven't asked over here, so you're beyond the 5 minutes.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Going back and forth.
Glad to do that.
Why don't we do that, and you'll have an opportunity to ask again now. Senators Simon and Cole have not had an opportunity to ask, as I understand it yet. So Senator Simon. And again, any member of the panel who continues to have questions, we will allow them the opportunity to question, but I want to make sure everybody gets a shot first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, not to the panel, but on a talk show this morning, one of the commentators said that I was the source for the leak of the affidavit. That is just absolutely false. I don't operate that way. I have seen how leaks have damaged people. Our colleague, Senator DeConcini, suffered a great injustice because of a leak, and I just want everyone to know that there is simply no truth. Neither I nor my staff leaked the document.
Senator, I'm sorry, if it's on that matter, continue, but before you get to questioning, I want to ask the panel a question about...
Go ahead.
You've been on for a while now. Would you all like a break, maybe to... yes, I can see the head shaking. Senator, would you rather continue your questioning now or give them a break and then question? How would you like to do it?
Could I, well, the panel would like to take a break right now. I'll take my 5 minutes.
We'll recess for 15 minutes.
As we have done throughout the 2.5 days of this hearing thus far, we'll be opening up our telephone lines during this 15-minute break by the committee to take your comments on what you've heard so far today. First up, New York City. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Number one, I want to say it's just great to be able to have a station like yours to bring the facts the way you have. But I want to be quick here. When they talked about motivation, I think that more emphasis has to go back to the year of 1981 with Professor Hill, because it was stated, as we look at it on television, that Judge Thomas said that that was the year that he was introduced to her by his good friend, and he also goes on to say that that was also the year where he and his wife were together, and they broke up, and in the end was divorced. And to be blunt here, it sounds almost like Fatal Attraction. This Miss Professor Hill, God knows she has excellent credentials, but many people still see it as fantasy because she had her agenda, and I don't think she meant to hurt him. Not seriously, but by talking to so many people, she now is into an arena where other people have got this ball and carried it, and they have their own agenda. The whole thing is very, very sad because here are two great people, Thomas and Hill, both qualified, both outstanding, and as a black person, an older person, God knows we feel proud of both of them. But the sad thing is they are both being used.
Thank you, New York City. Bristol, Tennessee is next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, it seems to me in listening to testimony, and I have been ill and been home listening to it, that Judge Hoerchner has impeached Professor Hill simply because she said that Professor Hill told of the conversation where if you had a witness, my career would be ruined, and told that occurred in the conversation in 1981. My understanding from Anita Hill's testimony that that did not occur until she was leaving the EOC to go to Oral Roberts University. Also, I would wonder why Chairman Biden would not allow the staffers who supposedly leaked or are involved in this to come forth and testify, why other people who were wanting to testify as to the fact that they told Judge Thomas that she was an enemy, why these people are not permitted to testify. It seemed like sort of we're waiting the testimony on one side.
Thanks for the comments. As a matter of fact, there will be another panel of witnesses scheduled for later on this afternoon. 2 senators yet to question this first panel of witnesses who are testifying on behalf of Professor Anita Hill. The second panel this afternoon, 4 people speaking on behalf of Judge Clarence Thomas. And then during our break between those panels, we'll talk a little more in detail about those 4 witnesses who will be speaking on behalf of Clarence Thomas. We're taking your comments. Again, the committee is in a 15-minute break right now, giving the witnesses a chance to get up, stretch their legs, take a break before questioning by 2 more senators on the committee. Next up, Sacramento, California. What's your comment?
I'm from Sacramento, and I just need a little couple minutes here. To begin with, I don't think this is a tragedy for the United States. I think this is really good that they have it on TV. And if Judge Thomas has any shadows, he is going to be appointed to the Supreme Court Justice, which makes the laws of the land, and I think that they should clean out his history. On his behalf, I think they haven't established a real long pattern, and I think he's a very educated man. On the other hand, Anita Hill kind of discredits herself because she did come forth 10 years later. However, I'd like to tell you that I am the subject of a sexual harassment. Number one, you are being violated when something like this happens, and the circumstances are so humiliating and embarrassing that you cannot take it to your family. Now, I was working for a supervisor that had a pattern of sexual harassment, and other women had come forward, but their credibility was not strong. I was a former temporary supervisor. I asked them not to transfer him to our area. 2 weeks later, I was working with him alone, and he said, if you want it, let me know. If you want me to get it down on my effing knees and beg for it, I will. I used to work on a Mexican farm, and they used to bring Mexican prostitutes. I still remember Maria. She was beautiful. They used to say when a white guy with blue eyes comes in, she gets all wet. Now, as these girls testify, it is definitely indelible. You have been violated. It is on your mind. So I think that these men that sit up there need to say that this is a problem. The leak is not the concern. It is the truth. I was...
Caller, Sacramento, we'll let you go at this point. We have lots of people who want to get through. Appreciate your making your comments. And we'll have our C-SPAN telephone numbers on the bottom of the screen. If you are trying and you get a busy signal, I appreciate the frustration. Our lines are quite busy this afternoon. If you do get a ringing sound, stay with us. If you have called us in the past 30 days at all, please hold off today. Let other people have their opportunity to get through. Fairborn, Ohio is our next caller. Go ahead.
Yes, I would just like to say that this has happened to me. And what Anita Hill has said in the past couple days and what these witnesses are saying now is ringing true with me. A lot of the way that Anita Hill reacted, I reacted in my own case. I would also like to say, as far as witnesses are concerned, in my own case, there were several witnesses. The harassment was blatant, out in the open. But when it came to my going and complaining about this, everybody shut down. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Everybody wanted to save their own necks. So for these senators who keep repeatedly asking, where are these witnesses? Why doesn't she have any witnesses? Why she continued on this job, I can understand why she did that, because I did the same thing.
Caller, let me ask you a question. If you're saying that you believe Professor Hill, should it affect the Senate's confirmation of Judge Thomas?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because this man's character is in question. No matter what his political philosophies are, he's going to be sitting on a bench and possibly judging cases that are going to come up in this area.
Thank you very much. Chapel Hill, North Carolina is next. Go ahead, please.
Hey there. Good afternoon. I just wanted to say that I think it's Clarence the Fox we got to be worried about, because if you can see what happened with him when he was growing up, his mama gave him up. His mama gave him up and abandoned him and gave him to his grandparents, and I figure he's been holding a grudge against women all that time. Now when he gets up to be the head of the Equal Opportunity Commission, he's separated from his wife, and things aren't going good with women, and he knows exactly what the law is. He knows that if he's got any witnesses, she's got a case. So we don't have to look at any pattern. All we have to look at is some good evidence, and I think this is powerful testimony from some wonderful people that have a lot to lose.
Thank you for the call from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Again, a 15-minute break. What you are looking at on your screen right now are some of the scenes from the rotunda outside the Russell Caucus room where the hearings have been taking place. Again, right now, the Senate is scheduled to vote on the nomination. The full Senate is scheduled to vote on Tuesday at 6 p.m. We will carry the debate and the vote live on C-SPAN 2. Next up, as we take your telephone calls, comes Mara Vista, California. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you very much for our opportunity for the whole world to hear this. I am wondering, however, why there's so much question in the minds of the panel in regard to Thomas's veracity and attitude sexually when he summarily fired a woman who called a man a faggot, but a man who had masturbated in front of several secretaries. Though he wanted him fired, he allowed him to remain for, was it 18 months, until he retired. There may be consideration that he had a family to support, I don't know, but this was brought up in the hearings, and it hasn't been repeated, nor has it been considered as motivation for Thomas's denial.
All right, thank you, caller from Mara Vista, California. You know, we have a number of people who are watching C-SPAN over this past 2.5 days that may not have watched our network before. I'd like to take a minute to tell you that C-SPAN provides coverage of this sort, gavel-to-gavel, live coverage of congressional hearings, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and always with call-in programs for you to participate. So if you are getting your first look at how Washington operates, getting interested in the system, have comments about the system, we invite you to watch our network other times as well and take advantage of our call-in programs and participate and voice your opinion. Next call comes from Chicago. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi. I'm having trouble understanding the validity of California. One thing that I don't understand is Professor Hill is in a position, or was in a position, directly to make a change, not only for herself, but for her fellow female Americans. She had a responsibility to report any such activities for women across the country who are in positions like this. I think that she had a fatal attraction. I think that she had designs on Judge Thomas, and when her desires were not fulfilled, she planted seeds in regards to these acquaintances that she had both personally and professionally, so that at a later time she could use that to corroborate her claim. I believe that this is terrible what she's doing to Judge Thomas, and like one of the senators said, it's like a missile coming out of the darkness to destroy a man's reputation and his work. And I believe that if it does come out that she has concocted this whole thing, that she should be punished for that.
Next up is Clinton, Connecticut. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, I'd just like to say, how could Anita Hill remember what Judge Thomas allegedly said to her 10 years ago when she cannot remember the names of the 2 FBI agents that came to her house on September 23rd, 1991? I think people should look into her bank accounts or the bank accounts of their 13 brothers and sisters. Guarantee when this is all over, she'll be on Geraldo and Sally and Oprah. And one more thing. How could Ted Kennedy sit on that panel and be the judge of anyone when there are so many skeletons in his closet?
Our next caller comes from Virginia, Woolbridge. You're on the air.
Hello. I just want to say that I think she was afraid to report her, her case because it happened to me, and the person that did, I'm still talking to him for 14 years. That doesn't mean I like him, but I'm a very friend of his wife, and I never really did anything to him. But one thing that troubles me is that if I was a lawyer like Anita Hill, nobody would do that to me and get away with. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you for the call. Natchez, Mississippi. What's on your mind?
Yes, I think that Anita Hill is wrong for hurting Clarence Thomas the way she is, and I don't understand why she would try to do these things to him, and I think that that Clarence Thomas should be confirmed to the Supreme Court.
Thank you for the comment. Pensacola, Florida.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. My comment is that she's telling a lie, and the previous caller said that she has a fatal attraction, and that is true, because she have all the opportunity to say something when she was a grade A, a lawyer A, whatever, and she have all the opportunity to say something, but instead
she followed him to another job. I think that is a main point there, that she is telling a lie. She's making up all these stories. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. If you've not watched our C-SPAN programs before, let me tell you a little bit about the process here. We have 7 lines coming into our studios here in Capitol Hill, and we take the calls as they come in at random. There's no science to this, nor can you construe what you're hearing today to be a scientific sampling in any way. Just a snapshot view of the people who managed to get through in our program and their comments on this particular issue. If you do get a ringing sound, stay with us. We'll be continuing to open our lines throughout the day, and you'll have an opportunity to voice your opinion. Next is New York City. Go ahead, please.
My name is Shelley. What I find hard to understand is that this morning she had 4 professionals, all in the legal field. They have heard her complaints over the years, yet they all sat on it, did absolutely nothing. I find it very hard to believe.
Okay, thank you for your call, New York City. Tucson is next. Go ahead.
Yes, it just seems to me that this definitely is a fatal attraction. And I want to say one thing about all this. The issue here really is not sexual harassment. That is an issue in the workplace. But the political ramifications of all this, playing this as a political game like certain individuals on that panel are, it really is a travesty, not only to the honorable judge. It's a travesty to Miss Hill as well, to be played as a pawn. The real loser in all this is our country, to see that we have stooped to such low measures. I suppose next year it'll probably be witch burning. It's just incredible. I hope that he is confirmed, and it'll be a travesty to this nation if he doesn't sit on the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. On your screen, you see some of the people standing in line in the Russell Senate Office Building, hoping to get into the hearing room today. An unprecedented, at least in my memory, Sunday hearing, and quite a busy scene in the rotunda there. A long line of people waiting to get into the room. There are a few public seats, and people are allowed to come in and stay in a rotation basis. And I'm sure that that line has been long throughout the weekend as we've had a chance to look at it. We are anticipating that the Senate Judiciary Committee will be back in session in just a couple of minutes, and we're taking your phone comments from around the country, those of you who have been watching the hearing today or what you've seen in the past 2 days. Monroe, Louisiana is next. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, I have a comment. I'm 60, own a business, and I have a girl who has gone through this. However, I say this, everyone has one good friend, one, that you can tell this to. I have told my employees, if a man says anything that you do not like, you are to put him out. You don't have to take this. We don't run a bar. We run a family business. One day my husband called a girl honey. He got put in his place. What I want to know is, why did she wait 10 years? There has to be someone. She has to be friends with someone. One very good friend.
And that panel wasn't what you saw?
Excuse me?
The panel that you just heard didn't fall into that category for you?
One of the senators asked her that, you know, and I'm very curious. At 60, I know that I could pick up the telephone and call a girl and say I'm having an affair, or my husband's having an affair. This young woman who was approached by a gentleman told me immediately. And I called him to the side. Out, I don't need your business, and I don't need their business.
All right, thank you for the comment from Louisiana. Next is Tampa, Florida. Go ahead, caller.
Yes. What I don't understand is how that the people who they have testifying right now can remember things to almost the exact, whereas the questions they asked Professor Hill, she has no recollection of this. So I don't understand she hasn't talked to most of these people for a couple of years, but all of a sudden they all remember all this conversation, but she doesn't really remember a lot of things.
So what have you concluded from this, sir?
I just don't think that it's possible to have these 4 people testify on her behalf when she hasn't really talked to any of these people.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Washington, D.C. is next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, my name is Gaynell Lewis, and I've listened to the panel that testified today, and they said that after being sexually abused, that you tend to stick with the person that did this to you. To me, I wouldn't want to be around that person because it is very demeaning. And I feel like once Ms. Hill had established her job career, or she's no longer around Mr. Thomas, I feel like she had no reason to continue to contact him. And I feel like she is just fantasizing, or she was in love with him, and she was disappointed because she was rejected.
All right. Thank you for your comments from Washington, D.C. A couple of other points about calling in. Several of our callers have given their first or their full names, and it is not necessary for you to give your name when you're phoning into our program. Also, please be ready to turn down the volume on your television set immediately when you go on the air. You'll get a feedback. We won't be able to hear you, and vice versa. So stay close to that TV set volume and turn it down so we can understand your comments and give you an opportunity to be heard. San Dimas, California, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm just calling. I'm calling from San Dimas, California, just to say that I don't really believe that this should really be in the open at the present time at all. And the reason I feel that way is that if there is no evidence that this event actually took place, then it should never. It is really defaming his character. And no matter what the outcome of the hearing is, there will always be doubts in people's minds because of what this lady has said. And this should never have been brought out in the first place. He should have been confirmed a long time ago. And I really don't believe at this point that the Supreme Court even deserves a man of Clarence Thomas's caliber.
How much of this have you watched, sir?
I've been watching quite a bit on and off.
And did you watch the earlier days of hearings?
Yes, I did.
You did.
I watched Anita Hill.
Did you watch, no, what I'm asking about, did you watch the first 10 days of confirmation hearings by the committee when the judge was...
Oh, no, I have not.
Why not the first and why this one?
Because of the allegations that were made.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next up is Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Yes. No one has yet mentioned that Professor Hill had much to gain by not coming forth because her associate would be a Supreme Court justice, and that would really help her career. And the reason she waited 10 years is because he was going to get an appointment to the most important position in the land, and this her conscience would not permit under the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Florida is next, town of Spring Hill, and you're on the air.
Hi, I'm calling because I do not believe these witnesses. I can't believe that lawyers cannot cannot suggest any kind of legal advice. And the other thing, being friends, you would discuss certain aspects of your life, whether it's embarrassing, whether you haven't seen them in 2 or 3 years. I mean, I have a friend that I haven't seen in 7 years, but if anything personal in my life has happened, I would tell her about this. And the other thing, I believe in abortion, but I also believe that Thomas will be a great justice of the peace. I mean, Supreme Court justice.
Thank you for your comments from Spring Hill, Florida. Bit of an artistic shot you just saw on your screen there. That was the dome in the Russell Senate Office Building, the inside of the dome in the Rotunda area. The Russell is one of 3 Senate office buildings just about a block away from the Capitol. If you have been to Washington before, you know that there are 2 very older buildings, and then the newest, the Hart, which has been open for about 10 years. This hearing has been going on now for about 2.5 days in the Russell building. We are told that the Senate will finish up today, but we'll keep you posted as we hear the schedule. Next up is Las Vegas. You're on the air.
Yes, the witnesses testified that Professor Anita Hill was too disturbed to go into details of the sexual harassment that was bestowed on her by Judge Thomas. Yet, in Professor Hill's testimony, I did not see 1 ounce of remorse, ill feelings, or pain in her expressions when she so candidly explained what types of things were said to her to the Senate committee. She said those things with such composure and such ease. Furthermore, none of her actions such as accompanying Judge Thomas to the EEOC, giving him rides to the airport when she was at Oral Roberts University, and the messages from the phone calls which indicated she continued contact with Judge Thomas indicate that she was deeply disturbed, hurt, or angered. I do not believe someone with a Harvard law degree was so desperate to put up with the allegations that she made. I also find it disturbing that none of the witnesses today, who are all highly respectable and intelligent people, did not advise Professor Hill to take action or find employment elsewhere.
Thank you. Washington, D.C. once again. Go ahead.
Yes. The reason I'm calling in is that I don't think anybody has noticed when Ms. Wells, in this panel of witnesses, when Ms. Wells testified, she was telling that incidences of sexual harassment, that these things you don't have to write them down, but that they stay in your mind unforgettable. And when you watch her, you notice, when you watched her, you notice that she got very emotional about it. I have had some experiences like that, and I can tell you, even after 20 years, you get very emotional talking about it. When you watched Miss Anita Hill in her testimony, I never ever saw in her face any emotion expressed that she was really upset about the incidences. Also, you would not drive your boss to the airport. You would not invite him to your apartment if you feel so strongly about the sexual harassment that she allegates.
Thank you for your comments, Washington. Forestville, Maryland is next. You're on the air.
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm an equal opportunity officer for a fairly large firm here in the area, and let me just tell you what I believe that happened. I think that during the course of Judge Thomas's and Ms. Hill's relationship, something came up. It could have come up in terms of discussion about sexual harassment. It could have come up about possible dating, but I think that the language that Ms. Hill professes that this individual said is just far too gross to be believable. And there's one other point. I think that perhaps what has happened is that her case has just been made stronger by the use of this language, but I just can't believe that this man has used this kind of language to another human being. It's just incredible. I just can't believe it. But I do believe that something happened.
Thank you for your call from Forestville, Maryland. As has happened so often during these past 2.5 days, our 15-minute break has stretched a bit. We saw that the witnesses are back in the room, a few members of the committee, but they have not yet gavelled the session to order, and we will continue hearing your comments from around the country until they do. Mountain View, California is next.
Hello. I want to make it clear that I'm not a supporter of Judge Thomas, but that I feel that if it is true that he made those comments 10 years ago, I would search my soul to ask myself whether, if it was truly an isolated incident of what I would think of as mental illness, I would still wonder about whether or not I could confirm him. But at this point, if he's lying about that time in the past, that, I think, is a more serious crime that is in the present, and that is what concerns me, that we find some way to get to the truth of this and understand it. But it is very hard to listen to both of these credible people and to think that one of them is lying. It just concerns me very much, and I'm very grateful that it's on the air.
Let me ask you, sir, if you were a member of the Senate and needed to vote on this within the next day, rather 2 days, what would you do, based on what you've heard so far?
I'd have to respond by saying I listened to Pat Buchanan's show last night and say that the idea that we should put a time limit on this concerns me. It may be necessary now that we're into this, and I think there's some argument to say that it's unfortunate that it got out in the public. I think that's a serious question. But I would have to say that now that we're here, we have to follow it down to the truth, if at all possible, as long as there's anywhere else to look.
So you don't think they should necessarily vote on Tuesday, then?
Not if there's any question left, or if there's... yes, that is right. I do not think they necessarily should.
Okay, and what kinds of witnesses would answer the questions you said you still have?
I'm sorry,
What kinds of witnesses would answer the questions that you said you still have?
I realize we're calling in the middle of a process, and I think we may yet hear them today.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. We'll take another call from the Washington, D.C. area. Alexandria, Virginia. You're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to say that I'm a first-time caller.
Glad to have you.
Thank you. Couple things. One, based on the fact that that he didn't give. I'm kind of nervous here, but that he didn't fire the guy who made the comment in his own office, Judge Thomas. I think that's one knock against his credibility. I don't see that his credibility has been tested all that much through these hearings. The other thing is the witnesses on your program who have experienced sex harassment seem to corroborate her story. Finally, I'd like to say that based even before this hearing, I think his judicial philosophy, I would have rejected him from the get-go, and don't feel like he has the experience that is necessary to sit on the Supreme Court of the U.S.
Did you, in fact, watch the first 10 days of hearings on when the committee was considering his qualifications?
Yes, a good part of them.
Okay. Yeah. And how much of the past 2 days have you been watching?
Actually, quite a bit, and all my friends are discussing it, etc. Everybody's talking about it, and up until today's hearings, I wasn't sure which way to decide on the truth of who was telling the truth. I think the witnesses this morning have basically made that decision for me, and the testimony on what a sexual harassment case and what a person feels who has been sexually harassed goes through in explaining Anita Hill's behavior.
Thank you for your comments. Houston, Texas, you're on the air.
Hi, Susan. Susan, I have a problem with this, and I want to tell you why. The gentleman just said something about a woman who's sexually harassed. I have had 2 cases of sexual harassment, which I have handled. They were in a corporation, a major corporation. Nobody ever touched me, but they said things, okay? So I wrote letters to all the big bosses, filed with the EEOC. The letters came down to the boss involved and all the women in the office. I looked bad. However, they stood behind me. I was removed from that man's capacity, which was what I wanted. After that, and it's been over 10 years, so I have no sympathy. I'm not a lawyer. I was 22 years old at the time. I had enough sense to know what my rights were as a woman because of all the civil rights and the Equal Opportunity Act. So I had enough sense to know what my rights were as a woman, and I acted on them. So to me, Judge Thomas should be nominated. They're wasting our tax money. The lady, it's her own fault if she did nothing about it, because women have rights, and we know what our rights are. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Another Washington, D.C. call. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I really think it's a tragedy that the Republican senators and a number of your callers who are women, and the men too, seem to think that if a woman is being sexually harassed on the job, they can, in this day and age, make a case out of it with no fear of reprisal. I know a number of women who have been through this here in Washington, where I live and work, and who are still going through it, and they don't have the economic means just to walk away from a job. And they certainly fear their bosses, many of whom are powerful men, and they're really very frightened, and they don't know what to do, but they need the work. And it's just a tragedy for people to believe that that's not going on today, let alone 10 years ago.
Thank you for your comments. As you can see, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Biden, is back in the room. Los Angeles, your comments while we're waiting for this to start up again.
Well, I have 3 brief observations about Anita Hill's panel. One was the statement that was the prepared petition by the compensation judge, signed by 65 colleagues. I think that was a total plant by the attorneys of Anita Hill, so I think that totally discredited the compensation judge's testimony. Secondly, the alleged harassment happened in the early 80s. If it did happen, then why, in 87, did she still bring it up to her colleague at the American University? And thirdly, Miss Wells said that women take that kind of abuse and treatment from men because it might be advantageous later on to have them as professional connections for their own advancement later on in life. Well, wouldn't it be to Anita Hill's, what would you say, her benefit if she would have waited until Clarence Thomas was a Supreme Court justice and used that as a benefit rather than bring this up 8 or 10 years later?
You've raised these points. What are your conclusions, if you have any thus far?
My conclusions are that I think, as someone said earlier, this is some kind of strange closet fatal attraction, and I think that he should be confirmed to the Supreme Court.
Thank you for your comments from Los Angeles. Our next call comes from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah, I agree with the fatal attraction line of thinking that a lot of people have expressed. I think people are overlooking the fact that this woman was a Yale Law School graduate, and being a Yale Law School graduate could have commanded, I would assume, a six-figure income and did not need a job in the federal government to make ends meet. I think that she stayed on and moved with him from agency to agency primarily because she had an attraction to him that perhaps was not returned in the fashion that she thought it needed to be returned. I don't think she would have needed whatever the federal government pays lawyers in the EEOC to survive because, and if her intention was to become a professor of law, it would seem that she could have gotten that type of a job as well.
Thank you for your comments. Lancaster, California, you're on the line. Go ahead.
Yes, I feel that Anita Hill is in it just for the publicity, to become well known. Whoever heard of her before this? I definitely feel that she's pushed by the special interest group, and I think Judge Thomas should be confirmed.
Thank you for your comments. Hallsville, Texas.
Yes, I only have one comment, and it refers to the time frame in which she came forth. I, too, was a victim, and it was of sexual abuse, and it was years ago by a family member. I, too, have never told anyone. I don't understand why people are having such a hard time believing that she waited such a long time to come forward. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of go and will to come forward and tell this. And I think she's telling something that should be a example for other women. Don't hold this back. I don't care if it was 20 years ago, if it was 50 years ago. Tell somebody. Bring it up. There is no need to hold it back.
Thank you for your comments. Reston, Virginia.
Yes, hi. I have a comment. A lot of people are talking about how Anita Hill reacted. One of my concerns as a social worker is that she is a typical victim. And people were talking about the lawyers and how they weren't helping her. As a social worker, well, I know of friends who have either abused their children, who are abused wives, and you can't help them because they are your peer, and anything that you offer is kind of like you're putting them down, and it's just not accepted by them. So I understand why the other attorneys couldn't help, and I also understand why she reacted the way she did. Thank you.
Before you go, let me ask you a question, because you, like many of our callers, are making comments about sexual harassment on the job. What about Judge Thomas's qualifications, to serve on the court? Have you made a decision on that?
Yes, I would not confirm him. And that's not only because I didn't agree with his political philosophy, but I think that if there's any doubt whatsoever about his character, that he should not be confirmed.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Next is Lovington, New Mexico. You're on the air, caller.
Hi, this is Connie from Lovington, New Mexico, and I just wanted to say that I've been having a real hard time understanding why it's taken so long for Miss Hill to come forward. Something of this nature, you don't wait this long. And also, being a woman, I know that if someone talked to me in that way, it would so repulse me, and she says that this has really repulsed her, blown her away. I would never have contact with that person again if I could. In the workplace, I would try to arrange it so that I was with people in his presence. I would never be alone with them. I would seek every opportunity I could to avoid him.
Should Clarence Thomas be confirmed for the Supreme Court?
Yes, I do believe he should be confirmed.
Why?
I really do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments. Alexandria, Virginia, you're on the air. Alexandria, Virginia. We'll try once and last time for Alexandria, Virginia. All right, caller, you've lost that opportunity. Sorry for that, but we'll go on to Seabrook, Maryland. Seabrook, Maryland, go ahead, please.
Yes, hello.
I've been listening to the proceedings for for the last couple of days, and I just wanted to say that I think for a person who had been sexually harassed, that Ms. Hill did not show enough emotion when she was testifying. And from what I can tell, it seems that, to me, something may have happened between the two of them. But I think it's that fatal attraction syndrome. I think the judge didn't give her the attention that she desired, and this has all been staged to get back at her. And I think, in essence, that there's no one that has come forward to say what has happened. It's still a matter of it's her word against his, and unless they get some witnesses that actually can testify to what was going on, I can't believe what she's saying. I really can't.
Thanks for the comments from Seabrook, Maryland. Our next comment is from out west, Oakland, California. You're on the air.
Hello. I've worked I'm an accountant, and I've worked in many office situations over the years where I've had women who were interested in me, and when I did not return that interest because I don't date people I work with, sometime down the line I've heard comments from other people that say that I was gay or something like that. So in this situation, what I think happened is that she had a lot of interest in Judge Thomas, and working with him over a period of time, she constantly beating her head against the wall, so to speak, where he wasn't interested in her. And then she made this stuff up to basically, justify the fact that nothing was going on.
Should we be having these hearings?
What was that now?
Should we be having these hearings?
No, I agree with Judge Thomas. I don't see the point of it all because, again, the statute of limitations is well over. He cannot be prosecuted for any of this, and so I don't see what the point is. Anybody can bring up an accusation tomorrow, and so what, they're going to have another hearing for that?
Baltimore, Maryland, your comments.
Yes, Professor Hill is perceived to be a very private, timid, wholesome individual, and yet when the senator the other day was interviewing her, he wanted to make mention of the phrase of the pornographic description of Long John Silver, and she quickly corrected him by saying no, it was a Long Don Silver. And I find it hard to believe that a very private, wholesome individual could 10 years later find a correction in that particular phase. And, of course, it would be a long shot, but I think the FBI should find out if a Long Don Silver pornographic films had indeed been manufactured 10 years ago. And if they hadn't, then it could draw some light that this thing had been contrived.
Thank you for your comments. You're watching C-SPAN, one of two public affairs channels funded by the cable television industry. C-SPAN's our first channel. Our primary business is the House of Representatives live in session. C-SPAN 2 carries the Senate live in session. And then the rest of